only 1 week you plant all your lettuce, you're going to get more lettuce than you can eat in 60 days, and you have to eat it all within two or 3 days, or otherwise it bolts. So when you're planting lettuces and greens and peas and beans, if you keep a record and plant it every 2 weeks, that way when they come to maturity, you have a continual crop coming in instead of getting it all at one time. The other thing too, I think that concept I really like a lot is using root vegetables. If you have really compacted soil, you can use root vegetables that they call them chiselers that will go in and actually start to break up the soil, and then you don't have to do it. But this is for long term. If you want to work on your soil and if you have a 10-year plan for really building your soil up, use parsnips or carrots. Parsnips are super strong. They will bust up soil like nobody's business. And so let those do the work for you. Let nature do that work. And then if you plant parsnips in some really packed soil one year, the next year it will have broken that soil up for you. Here we have a lot of clay in our soil. Clay is not bad, but it is a pain in the neck. There are a lot of minerals in clay, which are good, and clay holds water, which is good. It's when it gets hard packed that the water cannot penetrate it that's a problem. So if you have clayey soil, don't remove it. Figure out how to break it up and mix organic material in with it. So clay gets a really bad name, but I don't think it just takes some of that tender, loving care.
When you're doing container gardening with soil and the crop is done or finished at the end of the season, do you rotate that soil out into something, or do
What I do is I put it in my compost bin. So I add soil and actually all of the leafy stuff that I don't use. So that goes into my compost bin because it tends to be kind of light and fluffy and easy for the critters to work with. Because you guys, if you do start composting and you think, oh my God, I put so much stuff in my compost bin, I'm going to get so much compost next year. You'll get like that much. So, vegetables are something like between 80 and 90% water. So it's really, you get 10% of what you put in. So so don't think you're doing it wrong. You just don't get as much out as you think you would. At the big compost operation at the 9th Bay Bridge Urban Farm, worms love coffee grounds, and they also really like beer mash. And so if you know anybody that's brewing beer, or you can talk a brewer at one of the breweries and getting it cracks me up because worms like beer and coffee. And so they're not that different. All right, mulching. Mulching is so incredibly important to do for the 2 or 3 reasons. One, it holds the water in the soil. And you can do an experiment, mulch part of your garden and then not mulch the other part of your garden. And just check out what it does to the soil. I mean, the mulch holds in so much. It breaks down so that it will add organic material into your soil. And soil, if you have 5% organic material in your soil, that's considered good. And it keeps weeds from growing. So, the thing is, all right, straw, when you buy straw, a lot of times it has the seed heads in it. And then you end up having this unintended garden problem coming out. So if you can find straw that it shouldn't have a lot of seed heads in it, but sometimes it does. And
when you go to buy it, I just went, you can buy hay or straw. Hay is for horses, and it has seeds in it because that's what they eat. The straw, I think you can just kind of bang it around. Sometimes the
seeds will fall out. Yeah, you can't get them out completely, but so that's why it's good to steal your neighbor's leaves and use leaves for that. Again, use newspaper, use cardboard. But mulch heavily, and what I usually do if I usually use leaves or straw, is if I'm transplanting plants that already have somewhat of a size to them, I'll put the straw down first, and then I'll just make a little hole and plant it in there, rather than planting everything and trying to mulch afterwards, because it's a lot easier to do it that way. If you're starting seeds directly in the ground, you don't want to mulch it until those seeds come up and you can actually see them, because they're not going to be strong enough to move the mulch.
How big should they be before you mulch? How big the seedlings?
I would let them get maybe to about that big, so you can really see them, and they've got some girth to their stem, their main stem.
We mulched with leaves last year, our tomatoes, and it really worked well.
Mhm.
And we hadn't done that before.
Yeah.
Because the straw, I just bought a bale of 7 times.
Wow.
Is that newspaper in the lower corner?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah, or
several
pizza
layers?
box.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Well, I use pizza boxes under melons.
And this is where it's like, I'm all about free. You know, the leaves are free, cardboard. Sometimes I just cannot get over how much cardboard we produce in this world, you know? And so if you can take it from the recycling or the landfill and turn it back into soil, it's just so great. It's free. You know? Different kind of
I
economy.
find that too, with potatoes, when you have the potato beetle,
Mhm.
about a big layer of straw, they don't bother them so bad.
Oh, really? Okay. So now we're talking about bugs. So there, in a typical more of a suburban yard, there's probably about 1,000 different species of insects. Most of the insects are good. The thing is that the bad ones are really bad. And, you know, I think we have a really big problem globally with pesticides. And it's chemically altering us. So we need to all figure out how to get rid of bugs with no chemicals. And integrated pest management is the term that you'll hear a lot. And it's not just about bringing good bugs into the ecosystem of your garden, but it's also about figuring out how to kill bugs. And you can use insecticidal soap, you can use vinegar mixed with water and just a little squirt of soap for that. There are things like diatomaceous earth or BT, which are little diatoms that the bugs will eat, and they're like tiny shards of glass, and it basically just cuts them all up in the inside and they die. So there are things that you can do. So what we have here, so this here up here is a tomato worm, and they are voracious eaters. They will eat the leaves and take out a good chunk.
What's the white things on the outside of it?
Those are parasitic wasps. So if you find a tomato hornworm in your garden that they look like little grains of rice hanging off of them, you want to leave that, because the wasp lays its eggs on the tomato hornworm, and as they hatch, they actually suck the insides of the tomato hornworm.
I did not know.
So, I mean, the other thing too about gardening, it is full of drama. So leave that. If they don't have the wasp eggs on them, definitely get rid of them. If you have chickens, which I don't, your chickens will love them. What I do is I throw them over my fence, and then I hope that the birds will eat them. So bees, we know that honeybees they're up there with worms as their value. And so we have a big problem going on with the colony collapse disorder. So honeybees generally do not sting humans unless they're really provoked to do it. So honeybees are good. Ladybugs eat these little green, yellowy spots on there are aphids. You can buy ladybugs and release them. Praying mantises eat a lot of aphids. This garden spider you'll often see late in the summer. They eat thousands of insects, so they're really good to keep in your garden. So these are some of the, I think these four I put up here are the most common pests that you're going to see. This is a harlequin beetle, and they are relatively new. They have been moving up from Mexico with climate change. All they do is have sex, lay thousands of eggs, and eat your plants. I hate them. And so, I don't know, they can probably have like 1 billion babies a year.
Sheesh.
I'm exaggerating, but they are nasty. And there's no, except for really strong chemical insecticides, you have to manually control these things. Which means you need to look under the leaves and look for these eggs. And if you see them hatching like this, you need to try and catch this in the beginning. You can also plant trap crops, and what we discovered a couple years ago is that they love cleome. You know that plant that's also called a spider flower? And so, but these guys in particular, you need to stay on top of because of how fast they reproduce.
So you would maybe just break off the leaf that they were on and stomp it out, or what are you going to do with them?
No, I put on gloves and just squish them. And they'll be so mad that you can just run your hand on it on the leaf, because you want to try not to remove that much leaf material unless it's really damaged.
Are you finding that they're eating more than like your mustards and greens? Because that's where I see them all, is they destroy those, but they don't seem to bother my other stuff. Are they
I
eating
think
anything
if
else?
there's nothing left, they'll go for it. They'll keep eating whatever they can. But yeah, that's their favorite, are the brassicas. This one here, this is a stink bug. Stink bugs are relatively new as well. They have been moving up here with climate change. They are getting into people's houses as well. They stink.
Yeah, they stink. Don't stop them.
They smell.
I almost ate one by
They had a
accident.
terrible problem with them to be sick.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let you bring things down from there, but people were, I knew a woman that like went into it, she went nuts.
I'm going nuts
Because they were all over and
It's a big problem. They're destroying a lot of the pear and the apple crops that are in the western part of the state. So again, there are, if you look online, there's, people come up with all kinds of ways of trapping them, but you do want to try and, once you see them, you need to figure out how to get under control.
With the stink bugs, apparently the brown listerine, you can drop them in there.
okay.
Brown listerine, not like the mint one, but like the regular listerine. Yeah.
Hey, that's funny.
Yeah, that's true.
These are squash bugs. They're squash bugs or they're squash borers. And so those are two different things. And I didn't go through all, we could have a 3-hour class on bad bugs. So, there's so much information out there. But these are the squash beetles. And you'll also see their eggs look a little bit like these. And you need to look on the undersides of the leaves and look for the eggs and destroy the eggs as soon as possible. These are one of the most foul creatures on the planet, in my opinion. Cabbage ones, you'll see a lot. They also eat the brassicas. That's what the butterfly looks like. So if you see them floating around in your garden, you need to get ready to start looking. That's what the eggs look like. This is what the little caterpillar looks like. And the way I sometimes will look for them is to look for their poop, which is this kind of a dark green little pellets. And if you see those on your plants, you know that they're hiding underneath the leaves, and you can start pulling those off. And,
Pull the leaves off or just pull the matter off of the leaves?
you can leave the poop, but then you know that you need to start looking for the worms. Yeah, and once you start looking, you'll be like, oh, there's only 2, and then you start looking, and you'll see 50 before long. So, I mean, if you think one butterfly can lay that many eggs, how many times a year? So,
What suggestions do you have for slugs?
bottle caps or caps from jars with beer in them. They will get in there and drink themselves silly and die.
You know, I put the beer out, it seems like they drink it and go off there. I haven't But you have found that works?
And then I think salt. I don't
Salt,
know.
Yeah,
salt
salt.
rings
Salt.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works good.
Salt rings around what?
around whatever you're trying to get them away from.
They won't go over the salt.
They won't, or if they do go near the salt, it disintegrates.
And I have this long-haired cat that seems to come home with it stuck in her fur. So maybe it's so disgusting. But getting a furry cat that just picks him up because his belly draggles. So then this is where, you know, it comes with the TLC, the not afraid to get dirty, you know, and just really being out there. And another part of the drama is death in the garden, you know, being okay with being able to kill things. So, you know, and imagine if you had to kill chickens, and that's the whole next step up right now with the whole urban gardener thing. And
I don't know what we're gonna have to do. Well, I think I was just recently impressed with something about oil prices going up and how much vegetables and meat are gonna do.
Yeah.
And it's gonna get to the point where not only you're not gonna have no gas to go to the store. If you want meat, you're gonna have to grab one of them chickens in the backyard.
Take care of it. But you know, so I think, and this again is talking about the economy of our time. You know, so we've had this economy all around making as much money as you can. But if you pull back a little bit and think about what is economy, what is your home economy, what is the economy of the household? You know, it doesn't have anything to do with home. Well, maybe it does kind of a home act of, you know, women in the home, but it's not. I don't think it's that, because it's processed food that allowed women to get out of the house. You know, up until the 60s, women probably were cooking 8 to 10 hours a day. And I personally am not interested in going. I love to cook and garden, but I would like to have a good balance. So I think this goes to really looking at how we structure our time and our lives and what we do with it.
My grandmother had a little piece in the backyard about this big, and she grew everything that they ate, you know, by rotating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the intensive rotation, what's happening now with a lot of this urban ag and people that are making money is that I read about some people with 1.5 acres the other day that are making $120,000 a year in gross off of 1.5 acres. So food has economy, you know, and I think that's, because the economy around food has become somewhat invisible over the last 40 years.
What would you say an estimate, like how much space do you need to grow your food to feed a small family?
It depends.
Creatively, say you were using these creative
I think probably if you did a lot of succession planting and you grew as much vertically as you could, I think probably at 200 square feet, you know, 10 by 20 plot, you could get a lot of your vegetables on. You know, I think when you look at what your protein needs are, that becomes a whole different thing, because if you're going to use beans or legumes for protein, you need a lot of space for that. But for veggies, if you stayed on top of it, you could get a lot in a small space. So perennials versus annuals, this is a great thing, because a lot of times people just think that you have all your vegetables and are annuals, but and so you have to plant them every year. Now, so which gets to be kind of a pain in the neck. How can we integrate annuals or perennials more into what our food landscapes are? And those tend to be things like strawberries and rhubarb and your berries, and if you have enough room, you can start putting fruit trees in. And there are some perennial vegetables, not very many, like sea kale is one. There's a form of spinach that is more of a vine. But I think that's a really interesting to look at when you are planning out a garden. How can you get some things in there? Figs, for example. How can you start to integrate things into your garden that you don't have to be replanting every year? And again, like with the lettuce, the way I do lettuce and this crazy mystery plant here, is just figure out a way to minimize the amount of work that you're doing and let nature do as much work as nature can for you.
I have a question about the strawberries and that kind of thing. The stores are now selling blueberries. Do they require a lot of space?
No, a blueberry plant. You can get so blueberries. A lot of these plants have been bred for different sizes, and so like you can get a dwarf peach or if you let an older peach tree, those things get huge. And same with blueberries. You can get blueberries that can grow 12 or 15 feet high, but they also are breeding them to just grow to be maybe 4 feet high. So it depends on the cultivar that you buy for them. So pollination station, that's just something I like to use, is that make sure that you have flowers integrated into your whatever you're doing, because that helps bring in pollinators. Because moths act as pollinators, butterflies, wasps, bees. It's not just the honeybees that are pollinating. So we want to make sure that we have as much pollination happening, because that will give you an optimal yield. Harvesting and store. And back to the pollination station. A few years ago, somebody had planted one of these poly-headed sunflowers, and it must have had maybe 100 sunflowers on one plant, and the stalk was about this big. And I stopped, and it was very quiet, and I was watching what was going on within the world of this sunflower, and there was so much insect life happening. It was wild. There were these ghost spiders stalking flies, and there were butterflies and moths and different kinds of bees and wasps and different spiders. And I mean, there was this whole little, it was like a city in there for insects. And if you just stop and watch, they don't give a rat's ass about you. They're not concerned with you and your business. They have their own world happening. They are happy. And so, I don't know, those are the moments when you just think, we have
A wonderful world.
Yeah, yeah. So harvesting and storing, so a lot of stuff you want to eat right away. If you do want to have stuff to store, you can either can or freeze or do your root vegetables, which you can store for a long time. And back in the day, people had root cellars. But squash will store for a long time. Potatoes, sweet potatoes will store. Yeah. And just layer the stuff with some straw or newspaper.
We did, for years, I stayed home with the children, we would grow, I would say, about 5 rows of potatoes. And put them, layer them with burlap, and I had them all year. And the same with your onions or your, even with your peppers, just string them. Like you can braid onion tops and hang them around in the kitchen, and that one's all year. That's all.
And so then, the canning, that can be pretty energy and labor intensive. But
the drying too, a dryer is a really good thing. They're about $100, but they'll have shells in them. And then you can dry things for your winter soups. Cut up the squash, whatever.
And then freezing as well is always an option. And also kind of foraging around mulberries. Season is coming up pretty soon, and so.
What do you do with yours?
I make like mulberry cobblers and muffins and pies.
You see them everywhere. You can just stop on the side of the road and get a bucket full.
And help the birds eat them and then poop purple all over everything. So. Okay, common mistakes. Planting too much too close. I think a lot of beginner gardeners are like, yay! I'm going to get 100 carrots in this little tiny space. Remember, when you're planting something, have in your mind how big that thing is going to get. But the other trick with that is you can plant things closely as long as you stay on top of it and thin them. So if you plant your carrots too closely, you pull out every other carrot and eat the little carrots, and you can keep doing that. And same with lettuces, and not tomatoes or peppers or your fruit-bearing things, but root crops and any kind of lettuces you can do that with. Watering too much, you can definitely drown the roots of a plant if you give them too much water. You want to average about 1 inch of water a week. And so it's much better to give your plants one heavy dose and let that water really soak into the soil, because that's what makes the roots grow really well, of the plants. If you're watering them just a little bit every other day, their roots will not grow very deep because they're getting all the water that they need at the very surface. So water infrequently, but water deeply, and let those roots get really deep. Yes?
Do you know, like, I mean, I have no comprehension of how long it would take to do like a heavy soaking of like an inch. So, especially on like something like a soaker hose, how would you go about figuring that out?
So if you buy a soaker hose, it should tell you
Oh.
how long it will take to water an inch.
That's
The other thing you do, if you're using a sprinkler, put out a dish and just measure how long it takes for an inch of water to go. If you're using a hose and going directly in there, you know, I'll usually do like, I'll count to maybe 50 or something like that. Let's see. Not enough pruning. So pruning is something else that you can spend a couple hours talking about. Basically, this is something that I think you just need to be fearless about. It is not going to hurt a plant if you cut off a stem. And especially with tomatoes, we get there's some blights and some molds that tomatoes can get. And a lot of times you can help prevent that or keep it under control by cutting the stems off of the bottom so that air is circulating all the way around. Because tomato plants are incredibly dense and leafy. So if you try and keep some of that plant matter out of the bottom, your tomatoes will be healthier. With fruit trees, you know, they tend to prune really, really heavily because you'll have like 12 flowers will set from one bud, but 12 apples cannot grow in that one little space. So don't be afraid of pruning. Read up on pruning and don't be afraid to prune.
When is the best time to prune like an apple tree?
I think right now.
Right now.
Yeah. Until probably mid-March.
You want to, if you have water spouts coming straight up, you want a bird to be able to fly through the tree. And anything that's coming straight up, you want to cut off.
And if anybody's interested more in learning about pruning, may I recommend the Richmond Tree Stewards. I'm doing it right now, and it's really awesome.
The Richmond what?
Richmond Tree Stewards has a class.
Yeah, I'm a student.
You are? I'm learning so much. It's really a class.
Norm, you see too?
He hasn't taught one yet, but I hear he's going to teach us how to dig a hole.
I don't think they teach fruit trees though.
They don't teach fruit trees, but I'm learning a lot about pruning, just pruning in general from them.
Yes.
So, we talked about